Sometimes, the mythology surrounding a masterpiece is just as gripping as the art itself. Occasionally, the origin story is the story. This is exactly the case with the 20th century enigma, Fernando Pessoa, and his magnum opus, the Book of Disquiet. His life story feels less like a biography and more like a piece of surrealist fiction. Born in Lisbon in 1888, Pessoa was introduced to the brutality of existence early on. By the age of 5, death had already taken his father via tuberculosis. A year later, his younger brother followed. When his mother remarried, the family relocated to South Africa, stripping Fernando not just of his home, but of the entire landscape of his childhood. It was there, in exile, that he mastered the English language and fell in love with its literature. But the pull of home was too strong. At 17, he returned to Lisbon alone. He would never leave the city again, choosing instead to travel exclusively within the confines of his own mind. By the time Pessoa died in 1935, at the age of 47, he was a ghost. He had published almost nothing of note. He lived and wrote in total obscurity, invisible to the world, yet he died with an unsettling, almost arrogant certainty that he was a great literary figure, or that he was destined to become one. And in a terrifyingly prophetic twist, he was right. Pessoa left behind a legendary wooden trunk. Inside, crammed in chaotic disorder, were tens of thousands of manuscript pages, a labyrinth of thought that editors are still trying to navigate. For decades, these papers sat in silence. It wasn't until 1982, exactly 47 years after his death, mirroring the exact length of his life, that the Book of Disquiet was finally excavated and published. It immediately shattered the literary world, establishing itself as perhaps the most haunting and essential work of the 20th century. Opening this book is like stepping into a mind that is constantly breaking apart. It contains a lifetime of Pessoa's obsessions, the fluid nature of reality, the addiction to dreaming, the crushing weight of boredom, and the sheer absurdity of being alive. It is a study in paradox. Structurally, it defies logic. It is a collection of shattered vignettes, hovering somewhere between a diary and prose poetry. It has no plot, no linear timeline. You could read it backwards and understand it just as well as reading it forwards. But here is the final twist. Pessoa claimed he didn't write. He credited the work not to himself, but to a semi-heteronym named Bernardo Soares, a humble assistant bookkeeper working in downtown Lisbon, with earlier sections attributed to a figure named Vicente Guedes. It was the diary of a man who didn't exist, written by a man who wished he didn't exist. But here's the catch. Bernardo Soares and Vicente Guedes never actually walked the streets of Lisbon. They were ghosts conjured by Pessoa to construct the book. Throughout his chaotic archive of manuscripts, you find dozens of these fictitious authors. But Pessoa didn't just use pseudonyms to hide his identity. He created what he called heteronyms. These weren't just pen names. They were fully realized human beings with their own distinct biographies, astrological charts, writing styles, and conflicting philosophies. Pessoa didn't just write as them, he became them. Over his lifetime, he fractured his soul into nearly 80 different personalities. This makes the Book of Disquiet impossible to categorize. It isn't non-fiction, because the author is made up. But it isn't a novel, because there is no plot. It sits in a strange limbo. Pessoa himself called it a factless autobiography, the memoir of a man who never actually lived. This structure isn't just a stylistic choice. It is the philosophical core of the work. The use of Soares, Guedes, and the others reinforces Pessoa's terrifying thesis, that the self is an illusion. We are not one person. We are a colony of fragments. Reading the book feels like a therapy session for the human condition. Pessoa articulates the alienation we all feel but can't express. He describes the sensation of being a character in a novel that hasn't been written yet, hovering in the air, undone, dreaming of an existence he can't quite touch. In one of the most haunting passages, he describes his soul not as a solid thing, but as a black maelstrom. He vividly pictures himself falling through a trapdoor into infinite space. He sees his mind as a great madness spinning around a vacuum, a sinister whirlpool where faces, books, and fragments of voices float in the debris. And the most chilling part, he realizes that I am just the center of this abyss. I only exist because the geometry of the whole requires a center. I am the nothingness around which the chaos spins. For Pessoa, introspection wasn't healing, it was dangerous. He viewed the attempt to understand oneself as a free fall down a rabbit hole with no bottom. The inability to communicate this internal collapse is what generates the disquiet. It is the realization that to look inside is to see a void, and to speak is to be misunderstood. Throughout the manuscript, Pessoa is obsessed with the holy trinity of depression, tedium, futility, and meaninglessness. To him, the world outside the window is a collective delusion. Life isn't real. It is just a sequence of dreams that we haven't woken up from yet. He confessed that his only true occupation was tending to his inner life. Pessoa argues that our achievements in the real world are jokes. Reality is as fragile and fake as the dreams you had last night, vivid in the moment, but destined to dissolve the second the sun comes up. We are living in a fog that we mistake for clarity. This leads to a confusing contradiction. Pessoa wrote, "If I write what I feel, it's to reduce the fever of feeling. What I confess is unimportant, because everything is unimportant." But this begs the question, why write a masterpiece about how pointless it is to do anything? Why spend a lifetime articulating the impossibility of communication? This isn't an error in his thinking. It is the point. It is the power of paradox. Think of how a vaccine works. You inject a weakened version of a virus into the body to teach the immune system how to fight it. Pessoa's literature functions the same way. By creating and consuming art that stares directly into the void, we are exposing ourselves to the virus of being. We intentionally infect ourselves with a small dose of despair so that we can build enough immunity to survive the actual tragedy of being alive. Paradoxically, the realization that everything is pointless became the very fuel that drove Pessoa to create. It is crucial to remember that the Book of Disquiet was never finished. It simply stopped. In this way, the physical book mirrors Pessoa's philosophy of existence. It was trapped in a trunk, unknown until after his death, fixed in time only when he could no longer change it. It is a fragmented collection, written by a man who claimed not to exist, and completed not by intention, but by the clock running out. The book is not just a manual for living. It is a perfect metaphor for a human life, messy, incomplete, and abruptly cut short. There is one final, unsettling layer to this mystery. In Portuguese, the word Pessoa translates literally to person. The man who fractured his identity into 80 different pieces, who claimed he didn't exist, was named Person. But the most terrifying aspect of the Book of Disquiet isn't its philosophy, it is its prophecy. Hidden within the pages are passages where Pessoa predicts exactly what is happening right now. He wrote with a sad delight about a future he wouldn't be part of. He foresaw that one day, his sentences would be read and admired. He knew he would finally find his true family, people who understood him. But only long after he was cold in the ground. He predicted that future critics would write about how misunderstood he was in his time, pitying his isolation, and then he delivered a brutal truth. Men learn only what would be of use to their great-grandparents. The right way to live is something we can teach only the dead. And here's the chilling part. He was right. By watching this video, right now, you are fulfilling a fortune he told a century ago. We are participating in the script Pessoa wrote before we were even born. You have to wonder, was this a calculated master plan by a genius who knew exactly how to manipulate time? Was it pure chance? Or was it something supernatural? Whatever the answer, the story of the book has become inseparable from the art itself. It possesses a mystical quality. It feels like a religious text for atheists, a survival manual for nihilists. Reading it will likely devastate you. It will strip away your illusions. But strangely, it will also comfort you. It serves as a reminder not to take this absurd existence too seriously. As Pessoa showed us, sometimes you have to expose yourself to the sickness to find the cure. If you want to join the true family that Pessoa predicted, if you are ready to explore the deeper layers of philosophy, psychology, and the uncomfortable truths of existence, subscribe to Losculus. We are building the community he dreamed of. Let's decipher the mystery together.